Yeah, I wanted to be sure to let everybody know, and I'll put it in email too, that it is my intention that um, after we put together this year's chronicle, that anything that's left over, I'll take down to the American Gothic House for them to disperse and try to create interest, throughout the state in their way. And with them, it's, lots of people from around the country show up for that. So um, we just stumbled upon that as being kind of a very nice use of those those extra copies, which are donated by the Cedar Rapids Library, and we just we don't sell them, we give them away. So that's the nice thing. And if anybody here wants a copy, give me your email at your mailing address and I'll send you one out. Um, well, I know we have a little bit of a tight schedule today. And Dawn, I'm thinking we better get going with your
Yeah,
remarks so that you can uh, back-to-back meetings and things you have today.
right.
So let's turn it over to Dawn and I'll keep letting people in. Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah, hold on. I'll get my little thing up here. Yep. You know what? I can email this to everybody if that's okay. And I'll just kind of give a little brief summary of what I was going to read or talk to you about tonight. But I wanted to start with something that we just kind of a follow up on what we talked about last time, which was the 1935 Iowa Poets Anthology. And so Marilyn asked me, could you send me a list of all the names of the poets in that anthology? And I did. And she went and did some research with the very first Iowa Poetry Association, only in 1947, when it started, or when they put out their first anthology, it was called or IPDA. I'm not sure what the D it stands for. I didn't ask her, but she shared with me a poem written by a woman named Mary Wallace from Council Bluffs. And this poem is called Vindication. Some call us minor poets. Let not ignorance disdain the day of small things. The dull worm that painfully ascends the canebrake obeys the urge to seek its destined corner in the cosmic plan, remains a worm, or one day trembling, the butterfly leaves the drab framework of the hangar where for weary months it lay dormant and soars a thing most exquisite in mastery of flight. So each obeys the urge of nature. Through the birth pangs bring a thing of beauty, or it remains a husk of clay. What matters that? 1,000 things tell me why the minor poet sings. Gotta love it. So yes, anyway, kudos to Mary Wallace and kudos to Marilyn for doing some research for us. The Iowa Authors Club that we talked about last time, members of it, 14 of the members that were in the anthology of the from Iowa Poets published in this 1947 IDPA anthology. So there is a direct connection with our friends from 1935, contributors to Iowa Poets, and the first Iowa Poetry Association. So that's pretty cool. The two things I wanted to talk about this evening, and I had everything kind of all highlighted, and you'll see it in the link that I'm going to send you to this presentation. One is a triolet. And a triolet is it's a form that is closely related to the rondeau, which is a French form. And it's just an 8-line poem. Sometimes it's 9 lines, but there's repeated lines throughout the poem. So there's in the triolet, 3 of the 8 lines are repeated and two more of the same line are repeated. And all the end rhymes work together as rhymes. So you're going to see how this little form, and it's just I consider it to be kind of dainty. It might be something that if you're writing a beautiful little pastoral poem that might work with something that you see in Grant Wood artwork, or, it just takes you in that direction. A triolet is something to consider. So a triolet, the thing that I love about it is it allows that repetition, which, when you think about some of those repeated kind of circular shapes that you see in some of the Grant Wood landscapes, maybe that's a really nice little form to consider. So triolets, they're making a comeback. There are a lot of contemporary poets who have rediscovered the triolet. So let your imagination go wild, and get out your little your rhyme zone. Rhymezone.com is a source for it's a rhyming website, and you can just put in, here are the things I'm looking at. Or let me see if I have it with me. Oh, I don't. The Penguin Rhyming Dictionary, I know I've mentioned it before. It's fantastic. Or the Oxford Rhyming Dictionary kind of work the same. Just kind of looking at the sound. It makes finding those rhymes or slant rhymes really easy. The other form I was going to talk about was the villanelle. And the villanelle, it's one of those forms that is accepted into the traditional forms category for the Iowa Poetry Association contest. Villanelles were being written during that time. In fact, I was really surprised not to find one in our Iowa Poets book, but I didn't find one. But the beautiful thing about the villanelle, it's a 19-line poem, and it has 5 tercets followed by a quatrain, and it uses a lot of repetition. And I have all the different lines highlighted that repeat, but you'll be able to see that. And then and the first stanza really does dictate how that rhyme flows. And if you're looking for something that kind of brings you to mind of kind of a dance, or kind of a little bit of an incantation or a prayer, a villanelle is a beautiful style to use. I offer 2 examples. One is a more prayerful use of the villanelle. I believe that one's by no, anyway, it's a more prayerful one. But then there's another one that's really joyful. So you're going to see how you can use repetition if you're so inclined. It was originally used back in the days of the French court to sing pastoral songs. So if you're thinking about the pastoral, we talked a lot about that in the Iowa Poets book, a lot of pastoral poetry out there. You might consider the villanelle. So again, I'm sorry that I'm not able to access my presentation this evening. It worked so beautifully the last 2 times, and tonight it's just not. So I will email a link to that. It won't be the presentation itself. It's a link to the presentation. I'll email that when I'm done with my next meeting. And I would just say, happy writing. There's just, as we know from Grant Wood, form and function, they work together like hand in glove. You'll see that with poetry. You'll see that with the language that you're choosing for prose pieces. So let your creativity go a little wild, and think about how repetition might be just a really beautiful way to write an ekphrastic piece about Grant Wood's work. So again, I apologize. Oh my goodness. But yeah, I hope you have a great rest of the night.
Thank you so much, Dawn and Marilyn and Lynn. We'll see you back here when you can.
Yeah, I'll see
Or it
you
was
next
Julie,
week.
excuse me. It was Julie who let me know. So
yeah, I'll see you next week, and we'll talk a little bit about sonnets, American sonnets. So I know we've talked about the more traditional form, but we're going to talk about American sonnets and some of the really cool creative ways that American sonnet is being used. And it might work really well for even if you were thinking, oh, I was going to do this short prose piece, maybe you want to pack it into an American style sonnet. So who knows?
Sure.
But I would also, Marilyn, she's got her hand raised. I bet I know what she wants to talk about.
Yeah, what you got, Marilyn?
Two things. I just wanted to add, I joined in while you were talking about our discovery in the 1947 edition. The Iowa Poetry Day Association, that's the letter D. So that is how this association started, because Agnes Flannery decided that she wanted to have an Iowa Poetry Day. And she started bugging the governor about it, Hinkenlooper or something at the time, around 1943, 42. She started bugging him, and finally he declared an Iowa Poetry Day. And that was started out as the third, I believe, the third Friday in the month. And then they moved it to Saturday so the students could take part in it as well. And then from that, having that Iowa Poetry Day, the association was formed as the Iowa Poetry Day Association. And then in 48, the word day was dropped and there was a big hullabaloo. And the ones who wanted to keep the word day broke off. And then the others who didn't, they became the Iowa Poetry Association. And the Iowa Poetry Day Association eventually merged with this Midwest Chaparral poetry group later on. They didn't have enough members on their own. So that's a little bit of extra history that you didn't need. Sorry.
That's awesome.
That was it.
Oh, I love, it's good to know that background. And you know, it's inevitable that an organization that goes that far back might have synergies with what we're doing. So there you go. Well, wonderful.
Yeah.
So let's see here. It's 6:15.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Dawn.
Yeah.
And we have plenty of time to do a couple poems, Nancy, before we kick off Barbara's presentation.
Okay. So we'll see if this works, since I just learned how to do this from her over the weekend. I think make sure I get the right one here. All right. Okay, this is my attempt at a contrapuntal, which was a challenge, to say the least. So I wanted you to make sure you could see it, because when I read it, I have to read it 3 times. So hopefully I've done it correctly. I did look it up actually to get to the place where I could see if anybody had any restrictions, like if I had to do certain rhyme scheme or anything like that, and there wasn't anything. So I'm assuming that free verse is okay with this. So if I may, I will read it to you. So I'm going to read this. Can you see my cursor? Can you see that? Okay, I'm going to read this side first. I'm going to be this side, and then I'm going to read this side first, and then I'm going to read it together, if that's okay. All right. Okay. This is called Overmantel Decoration. Now, I guess I'm assuming that everybody knows which painting that is. I might be assuming wrongly. Nod your head if you think you know which one that is, which painting that is. It's the painting of the house out in the country. Grant Wood did it on commission to serve as a decoration over a mantle in a new home. That was in a new home that the Staymates family, it's a very prominent family in Cedar Rapids. The Staymates family had had built this home. And they needed something to go over their mantle. So I've always criticized this title of the painting because I think it's not very imaginative. But that's what it is. All right. So here's my take on the overmantel decoration. Out in the far country, wide open fields surround us. Welcome to our new home. The vast windows shine with open friendliness. But naked house and yard look so forlorn. Let's ask Grant. He agrees. Magical flowers and verdant vines now clothe our home. A fountain garden sparkles so splendid. Let's create a final enclosed border and sturdy frame. Okay, that's one side. Okay, second side. Thus rises a stately home with lovely spaces inside. Come inside, please. A huge warm fireplace beckons, and still inside the mantle is empty. Can someone help us? Grant Wood agrees. Our family rejoices. Happily we play among fairy trees, and we scamper to meet Daddy to ensure our family's strength and happiness. Okay, and together. Out in the far country, thus rises a stately home. Wide open fields surround us with lovely spaces inside. Welcome to our new home. Come inside, please. The vast windows shine with open friendliness. A huge warm fireplace beckons. But naked house and yard look so forlorn, and still inside the mantle is empty. Let's ask Grant. Can someone help us? He agrees. Grant Wood agrees. Magical flowers and verdant vines now clothe our home. Our family rejoices. A fountain garden sparkles. Happily we play among fairy trees. So splendid. And we scamper to meet Daddy. Let's create a final enclosed border and sturdy frame to ensure our family's strength and happiness.
Oh, wasn't that fun? I could see how you really challenged yourself, Nancy.
Yeah, it was.
It's like
It
a
was.
puzzle, isn't it?
It
It's a
is.
bit like a puzzle.
It
Oh
is.
my gosh, isn't that
To get it all
fun?
lined up together. So I didn't think about it, Barb, until after we had talked that it probably should have had a picture of the painting.
So when we're done sharing screens and stuff, or somebody could put a link in the chat if you want, just so everybody sees what it is.
Oh, that'd
But,
be okay. That'd be okay.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with the painting, because I guess it's not one of maybe the more popular ones that people do talk about. The border around it looks like a mat that you would put around a painting, but it isn't. It's also painted. And he created the frame for it as well, and the one that we have at the museum. And the fireplace underneath it, the painting is huge. The painting is huge, and the fireplace underneath it had to be huge as well. So we don't have a fake fireplace underneath it on display. That would be nice, I think. We used to, but anyway, the trees are classic Grant Wood trees, the little puffy cloud type trees, you know, that he uses. And in the backyard, you can see a fountain in a garden, and none of that was there. The vines on the house were not there. It was just a house stuck out in the middle of a farm field when he got this commission. And so when he painted it, obviously, you know, I'm thinking like maybe he would think he wouldn't want to paint it like it looked, because it wasn't very interesting. And so he added, you know, all of the flowers around the side. They're all very cartoonish. So you have the flowers around the outside and the vines going up the tree. And then the family is out in the picture too. And the father is coming home on his horse, and the mom and the children are meeting him at the end of the path. And so that's where the scamper to meet Daddy comes from at the end. So just a little explanation for you.
Well,
I drive by that house several times a week, and it looks just like it, except of course now it's not in the middle of a field, it's in the middle of the city.
No.
you know what, Nancy, when I look at that painting, and I've looked at it a number of times on display there at Cedar Rapids Museum,
Mhm.
I look at that, I'm like, it really looks the same, similar, but different from other Grant Wood things at the same time. I mean, there's something stylistically about it that just doesn't seem like so much what he would do on his own, but yet you see what he does. I don't know. It was a weird reaction I had to that. But anyway,
Okay.
did you have one more before we
I
launch?
do. Okay, this is a sonnet based on Woman with Plants. A story born among these verdant hills, the plantings, spring or fall, whenever seen, in baking sun or winter's bitter chill. I loved it all. I wished to stay the dream. But fate no longer smiled. My husband died. And fraught with grief, I faced the cruel chance. We left our farm, my children by my side, far from our roots, Life gave no winning glance. As years advanced, my family held its own. My son, an artist, capturing his state. Grant soon found fame. His work became well known. My portrait finished, part of his estate. So here am I, old, wrinkled, tired from strife, but every woman, mother, proud for life.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Nancy. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. You're welcome.
That's nice. Set a nice tone for getting into our study this evening. My goodness. So I would love, Barbara, for you to let the group know what you would like to share about your relationship to Grant Wood and doing presentations and art and because I know you have a really kind of deep and wide background in this, and I'd like to hear some select things for our group.
All right. Well, it's nice to see you all again. I am connected to Grant Wood through Jay Sigmund, which is why people keep referring to me when they're talking about him. But what happened is I was a teacher, and then I became a museum educator, and I worked in 4 different museums in Cedar Rapids. I worked at the Science Station to start with. I was there for 10 years, and then I went to the Granger House, and I went to the History Center, and I was asked to be the temporary guide for, or the volunteer organizer for Grant Wood's studio. And the reason is because I had found out about Jay Sigmund while working at the History Center, and that, of course, developed an interest in Grant Wood because he's his friend. And I loved it, and it turned into a more permanent job. So I was there for 5 years at Grant Wood's studio, and I met all kinds of people who had memories, and it really has helped me. And of course, I was there during the year that they had American Gothic and a whole collection of his works. So it was very, very special, and I got to meet those authors who have written books about him. I met Tripp Evans, I met Wanda Korn, all these people, and they're like amazing to me. So they helped me, but I'm not an artist. So that's my story. All right, are you ready to find out about Daughters of Revolution then? Ready or not, here I come. All right, can you all see that okay? Because I don't see you anymore, so hopefully you can see it. I know my husband will show up if it's not showing.
You're good.
All
We
right,
can go.
good, great. And so this is Daughters of Revolution, and I'm calling it Grant Wood's Revenge. So you will hear this story. To start out with, it happens that today is President's Day, and it is remarkable coincidence, I think, because when we chose these dates, I did not have it in mind, but it's definitely related. So I did a little history to find out about President's Day, and it was and continues to really be a celebration of George Washington's birthday. And it's added over time. So I always thought it was kind of a combination of George Washington's birthday and Abraham Lincoln's birthday, but it's really supposed to be a celebration of all presidents. But it started out with the 45th Congress, and it was back in 1878, and they made a bill to make February 22nd, which was George Washington's birthday, into a holiday. Now, we might think of George Washington, we think his birthday is very special, but here's a diary entry I found that shows that he didn't really seem to care about it at all. He doesn't even mention that it's his birthday, and his spelling is amazingly not great, but here it is. Friday, February 22nd, the wind in the night increased to a mere storm, and rained exceedingly hard towards day. It moderated and ceased raining, but the whole day afterwards was squally. Laid in part of the worm of a fence, which I looked up, and that's like the nails or the foundation underneath the fence that you need to make it stand, round my peach orchard and had it made. Waited on Lord Fairfax at Belvedere, engaged him to dine at Mount Vernon on Monday next. Upon my return, found one of my best wagon horses, namely Jolly, with his right foreleg mashed to pieces, which I suppose happened in the storm last night by means of a limb of a tree or something of that sort falling upon him. Did it up well as I could this night. You'll see no mention of the fact that it's his birthday. But people all along during the years really, really admired George Washington. And Mason Locke Weems wrote a book back in 1858, The Life of George Washington, with curious anecdotes, fully honorable to himself and exemplary to his young countrymen. And this book was one that Grant Wood was inspired to make into a painting. And this is part of his painting, where George Washington is a little boy with axe in hand, ready to cut down a cherry tree. But in 1932, many cups were raised in celebration of George Washington's birthday. 1932 was a very special year because in 1932, George Washington's birthday had been a legal holiday for several years, as I said, but on this year, it was the 200th anniversary of his birth. So in 1932, there were lots of things going on for George Washington's celebration. There was a whole Congress kind of thing, not our government Congress, but a group, who worked for 6 years in advance to get these all started. They made medals. This was the first year, and thanks to my husband, I actually have a quarter from 1932 with Washington's head. He was put on a stamp. They had plates, and of course they had books for children. The stamp was used for postcards, and the postcards that came out, a lot of them turned into invitations to special events going around his birthday celebration. Here are some of the postcards. And some of the events, they had one of these in Cedar Rapids, although I couldn't find a picture of it. This one is the Daughters of American Revolution, which is kind of cool to know because you'll find out later. But this one's in Madison, Wisconsin. Our group had in Cedar Rapids, they had our Daughters of American Revolution did some things too, which I will tell you about, but they did have a costume ball, and Grant Wood loved costume balls, and he won a prize at this costume ball. Everybody was supposed to dress up like somebody from George Washington's time, and he dressed up like the Quaker Oats box man. So here's that cup. I said this is a very special cup in 1932, part of the celebrations. And the reason it was above all the other cups raised in celebration, probably the most important and the most well-known, goes to the story of the window, the memorial window, this gorgeous stained glass window that Grant Wood made. And Terry Van Dorsten and I did a whole presentation on that last year. You're going to see some of the same pictures, but here it is. Started in 1925, 7 years and 2 months after the armistice was signed between the Allies and Germany. Cedar Rapids, a very patriotic city, decided that it needed to expand and create a magnet, a draw for northeastern Iowa. And so there was a political push to rally around the government funds and build a combined Veterans Memorial, City Hall, and Civic Center. And in 1918, when Grant Wood was joined the Army, and he was a veteran. And so hearing that they were going to do something with veterans and it was going to include some things related to art, he said he would like to participate in this. And he wrote a letter in 1926, "Dear Mr. Brown, I wish very much, as you know, to get the contract for the stained glass window in the Memorial Coliseum." And here are some of the ads that were going out telling people about it. And he got it. January 25th, 1927. Here's the headline in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. He is not well known yet. I want you to remember that, because he had not yet painted American Gothic. And that's when he really became famous. He was pretty well known in our community, but not in the country. So Grant Wood almost immediately, because even in the article that says he got this thing, they said he was going to New York, and he did. He went to New York immediately and started doing some research to find out what the uniforms look like and find out about the various wars that have been fought between the American Revolution and the time of World War I. And he took advantage of some of his, not advantage, but he asked some of his students. In this particular picture is the yellow arrow on there is pointing to the student who becomes the American Revolutionary soldier in the window. He didn't want to have the faces recognizable, but he did want to have the uniforms right. So here's a picture that he found. And the reason we know what he found is that we have his, you can see his notebook that he kept sketches and notes and stuff. It's at the Figge Museum. So here's an illustration that he found, and that's what he drew from that to give himself ideas. And here's one of the Washington High School football players, and that turned into the Revolutionary War. Of course, he also used his sister. His sister was a model for several paintings. Most famous, of course, is American Gothic. But in this case, she was Lady Peace. And here is a picture of the original drawings that he did, which were life-size, same size as the window itself. They were huge. And Terry Van Dorsten has them now at the Veterans Memorial Building, and we've been doing work. And I'm writing a book on this, and it just so happened that she had just received these. And so I was there when she first opened them up. Here's from the notebook, a picture of his sister's arm. And his sister wrote that she had to hold her arm up. It was so hard that he created a kind of a pillow underneath, and he had her draped in wet sheets because he was trying to make this clothing look really good, and he didn't know how to do it. And because they were wet, he set up a fireplace special and everything to take good care of her. So she has her arm on a pillow and she's draped in these really cold, wet things, but it came out quite lovely. And there's and it's huge. It's much bigger than the soldiers there along the bottom. And here's a picture just to give you an idea of how big this painting, this stained glass window is. This is the original drawings once again, and they're the same size as the window. And here he is at Quaker Oats plant, helping to, he has his, Arnold Pyle, his associate, is helping him with the painting, with the drawings, the original, they called them cartoons. And this is another thing that was in the Gazette, June 3rd, 1928, after he'd put together the ideas for how he was going to make this window look. And you can see that it's huge. And what I've heard is that when he started working at Quaker Oats and he wanted to fit in with the other workers, that's when he started wearing overalls. So all that work, and then when it came time to actually trying to make the design to fit into stained glass, he realized that he couldn't have curvy surfaces. So he actually had to redraw a lot of the parts. And this is from Terry Van Dorsten's in the collection there. When you see the original drawings, you actually can lift up the layers because he had to change the shapes of them. And he wanted to get help from the very best. So he ended up going to Emil Frey Stained Glass Artisans. And they had workers in Munich, Germany. So he traveled to Munich and worked with these artisans from September to November of 1928. And when this was, this was published in the Gazette, again, now here we are in 1929. And when the Daughters of American Revolution read that he had gone to Germany, they were not happy because we had fought World War I against Germany, and they did not think it was appropriate at all for him to go to Germany to make a veteran's window. So even though he had all that work, several years of work, and he had done, as we shared with you last year, an amazing amount of work and really almost redesigned the way he painted by what he saw in Germany and what he did and what he learned. These women, and this is not Cedar Rapids, these are the national officers. They're standing in Washington, D.C., but we had our own, and they were the ones who first complained. As months passed, nothing was done to give the window a proper reception. Grant became disturbed. On May 11th, 1929, he wrote an appealing letter to the commission chairman. I am writing this to you personally as I do not seem to be very effective in dealing with the Memorial Commission as a body. You must not blame me for seeming impatient about this, as I have done my very best to create a fine piece of work, and I have felt bad that it has been exposed to the public gaze for over a year. My thing is hidden under such unfortunate circumstances. So for the very first time, all right, so here we're going back to 1932, and we have this special celebration of George Washington's birthday, and the Daughters of American Revolution, who the very ones who had said, oh, this is terrible, he shouldn't, and had delayed so that they never did a dedication of the window, even though it was so gorgeous. For the very first time, he decided to use his paintbrushes in revolt. And he made a painting against people instead of for them. He calls it Daughters of Revolution because he knows better than to call it Daughters of the American Revolution. And he didn't use specific models. He just kind of generated faces that would kind of look like, a combination of all these women. Look at their stern faces and everything. They're very proper, and they're very, and look at the painting behind it. The painting behind it is very important. This painting is George Washington crossing the Delaware, and Grant Wood put it there without the knowledge of these. The Daughters of Revolution, the Daughters of the American Revolution probably did not know this, but this painting has a very special background, which I will share with you momentarily. But he put it there because it's showing the George Washington patriotism. In the painting, in the end, the painting was seen by close to 60 million visitors to Chicago from 1933 to 1934. And it was the picture that everybody wanted to see. They had postcards of it and everything. And I spoke to some people who work at the Cincinnati Museum of Art, which is where is housed at this point, and they told me that they had records that showed that postcard of that painting was the one that was sold more than anything. And but the people in Cedar Rapids were still opposed, and of course they hated the painting. The Daughters of American Revolution in Boston thought it was hilarious. They loved it. But in a letter written to Ed Rowan in 1934, Grant Wood wrote, "The Daughters of American Revolution of Baltimore, I am told, are trying to have me investigated by the Immigration Board. They are sure that I go under an assumed name, and if the truth were known, I am a Red and should be deported," meaning a communist. So here's that painting, Washington crossing the Delaware. And here's that teacup that's raised in protest. The teacup has an interesting story behind it. This is Fran Prescott, who first hired Grant Wood, even though he wasn't a certified teacher, to teach art in her school. And she loved him and she admired him. And she said, "If I can ever give you a hand, let me do so." And so he did. He used her hand in that picture. It's the only known model that he has in that picture. It's her hand. Let's find out a little bit more about this. And if this works, it's almost a miracle.
There's rarely been a painting as misleading as Washington crossing the Delaware. Not only is it misleading because the crossing was actually made at night, but also because the flag shown here was only created a year after the event. But those are technicalities. This painting is misleading because the intention here wasn't to pay homage to Washington or to produce a historical painting. Surprisingly, this painting isn't even about the United States. To understand what this painting is about, let's take a look at Grant Wood's Daughters of Revolution. In 1927, when Grant Wood decided to use German materials for a stained glass window he was commissioned for, the organization Daughters of the American Revolution denounced the artist for working with materials purchased from a country they were at war with less than a decade ago. The Daughters of the American Revolution is an organization which, to become a member of, you need to be a direct descendant of someone who participated in the American Revolution. Grant Wood called them people who are trying to set up an aristocracy of birth in a republic. In 1932, Wood paints Daughters of Revolution, caricaturing members of the organization, showing that there's nothing revolutionary about them. However, Wood decided to paint a reproduction of Washington crossing the Delaware behind the Daughters, and this choice was a very careful one. Washington crossing the Delaware is a painting made with German materials, something Wood was criticized for. And the reason why this painting was made with German materials is because it was made in Germany by a German artist. Washington crossing the Delaware is a German painting. Emanuel Leutze was born in Germany, and when he was still a child, his family moved to the United States. In 1841, he moved back to Germany to study art. The 1840s were a quite tumultuous decade in Germany, which was divided into 39 independent states. It culminated into a failed revolution, sparked in 1848, which was driven by liberal ideas, criticism of autocratic governments, the will to unite the 39 states into one country, and, for the working class, better conditions. Liberals and socialists, liberal bourgeois, peasants, and workers fought for a better Germany, but failed. Leutze was a strong supporter of the revolution, and he wanted to lift the spirit of the defeated reformists and revolutionaries. He couldn't directly advocate for liberal ideas or for revolution in his paintings. He had to cover himself. He had to conceal his intentions. So he made a historical painting about the American Revolution. Leutze presents it as an unbiased, apolitical representation of an event from the country he grew up in. To an autocratic government, this simply pays homage to a key moment of the foundation of the United States, led by its most prominent leader, George Washington. Washington crossing the Delaware shows the crossing of the Delaware River on the night of December 25th, 1776, which enabled a surprise attack during the American Revolution. However, though the painting shows the crossing of the Delaware, this is not what it's about. Lutze didn't intend his German audience to understand what the Delaware River is or its impact on the American Revolution. Lutze showed a group of revolutionaries and liberal reformers fighting an autocratic government, fighting for liberal ideas such as freedom of speech, freedom of association, individualism, political and legal equality. Most of all, Lutze showed a group of revolutionaries who didn't give up, people who kept fighting, people who, through their determination, were successful. Inspiration is the goal here. Lutze is obviously romanticizing the event. It's heavily narrativized with Washington heroically posing with the American flag waving behind him. However, he's also conveying some aspects necessary to revolutions. Importantly, solidarity. The figure of a boat has always been a symbol of the need for solidarity and cooperation. Lutze adds to this symbol the idea of diversity, showing a wide range of differences amongst the revolutionaries. We can see a Scottish man, a black man, an indigenous man, 2 farmers, and perhaps even a woman. This diversity, when transposed to the German context, could refer to the 39 different states trying to unite, or to the differences in social positions of the revolutionaries, whether they be liberals, socialists, bourgeois, peasants, or workers. However, what I find most admirable in what this painting represents is the idea of determination. This is what this painting is truly about. It was made only a year after the failure of the 1848 revolution, and it's saying, keep fighting. This painting in itself is keeping the fight alive. By advocating to continue, by telling the German people to not give up, Lutze keeps fighting. This determination was present even in the very making of the painting. He made 3 versions of it, after the first one, completed in 1850, was damaged by fire and then restored. I am particularly grieved to think how much longer I shall be detained from going to America. I have even thought of going at once and painting the picture there. Already I have ordered another canvas and shall go to work upon it at once as soon as I receive it. Nothing shall deter me. This commitment, this determination, wasn't to his art, to his project, or to his love for American history. This commitment was to the ideas, the ideals, and the values he ardently defended. This painting isn't about the United States or its history. It's about the revolutionary ideas Lutze espoused, the ones he defended for his native Germany. Washington crossing the Delaware isn't about Washington, about the Delaware River, or even about America. That was just a means to achieve or contribute to something greater, a revolution.
So Grant Wood had learned about this painting. The Daughters of the American Revolution had read about the painting when they were trying to have all these celebrations on the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. And they were very upset because they learned that this painting wasn't even on display, that it was rolled up in a basement. And they had this big brouhaha trying to get everybody to recognize that this painting is so patriotic for America and it should be up on walls everywhere. You know, they should have it permanently displayed. And they made, they were really rebellious about this, and they made a big deal about it, and it ended up in the papers. And but also a little bit later on, there was somebody who said, no, this painting is German. And when Grant Wood found that out, that's kind of his dig. So here are some these are people in the in our own building, in the Veterans Building. This is 1953, and they're finally getting ready to help let people know that this window it's finally being accepted after World War II and everything. But this is after Grant Wood has died. So it was delayed because of the Daughters of the American Revolution. The dedication of that window did not take place until 1955, which was 13 years after Grant Wood had passed away. It's amazing. The painting of Daughters of Revolution there is a drawing of it that was given to Coe College, and that's still on display there. The original painting was sold to Edward G. Robinson, and then he was divorced and ended up donating it, or not maybe donating, I'm not sure exactly, but it became part of a collection of his paintings that were given to the Cincinnati Museum of Art. That's the interior of the Museum of Art. And I know my daughter goes to Cincinnati all the time, and I'm thinking, you better get there, Heidi, because look at that building. It's beautiful. And here is our window looking gorgeous. And believe it or not, that's just a reflection of the window. It was designed so well that as the sun shines through it, it reflects in the auditorium that's beyond the window. And this is November 2022, just last Veterans Day. And so we can enjoy the window. We can enjoy seeing the painting. We've learned a lot about it. But of course, people are still fighting, and there are probably still people who don't like Grant Wood, but we all love him so. And we all love George Washington as well. I want to thank a lot of people for helping me get information. Terry Van Dorsten, who couldn't make it tonight, but she was just and is, because as I said, I'm writing a book. She is fabulous. She works at the Veterans Memorial. And Sylvia Popelka, who goes down the same rabbit holes that I do and was a really big help. Steve Hanking for giving me that wonderful video. Steve Feller, who is my, well, he's my husband, but he is fabulous. He does all kinds of scanning, and he let me borrow his 1932 quarter. And of course, Elaine, who is organizing this whole thing. Okay, that's what I have to say about that. And anybody who has questions?
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is such a rich painting to dig into. And of course, I mean, it's referenced in so many books too. So you can really go down the rabbit hole really far with that thing.
Oh,
And
sure.
and thank you so much for unlocking lots of elements of that. And what do you got, Joe?
Well, I didn't mean to cut you off. I had a question
no.
for Barb.
Nope. Sure.
Barb, if you don't mind, I guess it's a two-parter because I know, Deb, you have some cool stuff on this too. I'm very curious about the Blue Willow China and this notion that by the time Grant did that painting, it was viewed as kind of upper crust, but in reality, it was just like cheap printware. But I understand Deb has a cool story about trying to find the actual cup used in the painting. If you don't mind, if you could both kind of weigh in on that. I'm very curious, trying to connect the dots that I've heard in the past.
I believe that Grant Wood's family used that china. Is that true, Deb? Do you know? Where are you?
Well,
Oh, there you
what I have on it is in a scrapbook that Nan had given me. She had written about visiting going to the Edward G. Robinson home, and he wasn't there. He was at a movie. She and her husband Ed went, and they got to see the painting. She visited with them. They met her daughter, but in what she wrote in her scrapbook was that she later gifted the cup to Mrs. Robinson. So, of course, we know their marriage didn't last, and But I don't know what happened to the cup afterward. That was, I think we had talked about that before. Who knows if, you know, the cup went along with the painting, but Nan had gifted it to Mrs. Robinson.
Barbara, do you know where the painting is now? Did you say
Yeah.
that? I just missed it.
Yeah, it's in the Museum of Art in Cincinnati.
Got it.
And there is a drawing, a hand drawing that was done that's at Coe College in the library.
I had read also that after Edward G. Robinson had it, that at one time the shipping magnate Stavros Diarchos had purchased it amongst some other art pieces. And then at some point, then it went to the museum.
That's correct. And I don't know exactly how it happened because he got that painting and then it ended up as part of an Edward G. Robinson collection that went to the museum. And I don't know what happened in the middle to, how it got separated or what happened there. But you're right. I forgot about that.
I heard he didn't like the American paintings or something like that. I don't know.
Oh, right. Well, Edward G. Robinson found this particular one quite amusing, apparently, and so he loved it. But yeah, I see that Shannon is asking about my book. My book is called. It's about the window itself, and I'm working on it. It's supposed to come out on Veterans Day this November, so we're very close to getting it out. And it's, yep.
Sylvia?
It can be Barbara or Barb, no problem.
I am curious about why the painting, the German painting of Washington seems so dark in Grant Wood's painting, because I think the real painting of that is quite colorful and bright. And I didn't know if there, of course, who knows, but it just seems like it also is very subdued compared to the painting, the real painting, I guess. Does that make any sense?
You asked that question and I don't know the answer to it, although sometimes I know that some paintings in those colors might just fade. Steve, you probably know more about it.
Well, there's a couple of things about that painting. The crossing of the Delaware was at night, for one thing. Washington was not a very successful general. In terms of how long he was a general for over 10 years. And this is one of the places where he actually won. But he had the Hessians outnumbered about 3-1, and it was on Christmas. Most of the Hessians were drunk, so it became an easy win. Although, when you win something in New Jersey, what have you won? That's kind of the way it is. The other thing that the only other battle that he ever won was the final battle of the Revolution. And that happened only because the French were helping him out, and they basically cut off the British from their ships. And there were actually more people that were French on the battlefield than there were Americans. So when the surrender was to take place, the British general, Cornwallis, wanted to surrender to the French, but the French wanted to make a joke out of Washington or out of the English. And they said, no, you can't surrender to us. You have to surrender to Washington, because he was such a failure as a general. They wanted him to look bad. And so they made him surrender to Washington. So that's a couple of little oddball things that I've discovered over time, reading the history of the Revolution through Benjamin Franklin. And a lot of this stuff comes out in a couple of his books. But maybe that's the reason why that painting is so dark, is because it did actually happen at night. So it's up to you now.
Yeah, I was kind of going down the rabbit hole there, Steve, a little on that. And I think to your point, you're probably somewhat right, because they're mentioning that it was just before dawn, is the time of day of the painting. And for whatever reason, I mean, I suppose there's a lot of art students and historians who could speak to the composition of it and the choice of color and all that. That's probably another rabbit hole we could go down if we really wanted to. So feel free, someone.
Well, I also wanted to mention that the detail that Grant Wood painted around in the frame, it's just amazing. And I got a print from the Cincinnati Art Museum, and I counted the little dots, but I had it on a piece of paper, which I can't find now. But just imagine the time it takes to make all those like little wooden buttons that are on. He must have been very patient to do that.
Yeah, Martha.
I have a quick question, Barb. Have you ever heard anything about the noses of the women on the Daughters of Revolution?
Not in particular. Why?
Well, I may be way off, but I heard somewhere that another way for him to get back at them was to design the noses like male genitalia.
Oh, really? I believe it, but I never heard that. We'll have to look at that more closely next time, won't we?
We have check the noses. You'll be amazed.
Well, they're right behind you there, Barb. So we
they are
right behind you there.
I'm looking at them. All right. Any other questions or anything? Joe?
Yeah, so the drawing at Coe College, I've never really put it up right next to the final product and kind of gone back and forth to see what changed or what was different. I know it wasn't signed from Grant to Thomas Hart Benton or one of his regionalist buddies.
Oh, I don't know that. That's a very good question. I should go take a look at it and find out.
I'm just curious if anybody has ever kind of compared the two and what can we glean from what happened in the drawing and what ended up being in the final product. Sometimes things get cut off or amplified or,
I had a picture of it, but I guess it was in my presentation. That one was a picture of it from Coe College toward the end there. I might be able to find it again. Let me see.
And while you're doing that, if I may, great job, Barb. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that.
Right, here it is. This picture is from the Coe College one, but I don't have it big enough to. I thought it was, but now that I'm looking at it, I think it's the original that it doesn't look any different at all. So I think that's not. Yeah. Are you even seeing it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll have to check that out. That's a very good question. I don't suppose my husband knows. He works at Coe. You don't know anything about it, do you?
No.
I know it was donated in 1954, and I know I should know the name of the person. Owen Elliott, and it's the original pencil drawing of the painting. So it's like his cartoon again.
Well, Barbara, I'm not sure whether you came across this. I came across it one time. But I was looking for it right now. I can't find it, but I think that Nan would have qualified as a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the Woods side, there was some kind of a canteen or a drinking object that Grant had that supposedly George Washington had drank from. Do you know
Oh.
anything about that story?
I do know that she was able to be a member of Daughters of the American Revolution. I'm not sure if she actually joined or not. He was not really happy with that kind of a group. He thought they were, not what we needed in a democracy, that they were trying to make themselves into an aristocracy of some sort. So I don't know, but you're right. And he was definitely a veteran, and even the veterans were opposed to some of the veterans were complaining, forgetting that he had been a veteran himself, were also complaining, and that added to the delay in having this dedication. That's a cool story about the canteen, though. That's very cool. He actually drank from it.
Barbara, I think when you and Terry did a presentation last year and you had me read the letter, didn't Grant say something about that he was a patriot? Like,
Right.
you could tell he was very, very patriotic.
Yes, if you read that's what he wanted to do. And he certainly dedicated himself to making the window. And he certainly did not go to Germany because he was in favor of Germany or anything, although there were all kinds of rumors that got spread around and everything. But he was definitely there just simply because they were the best artisans for what he had to learn how to do.
Well, Barbara, I'm fascinated by just really how much of a blowback there was, because there were so many German immigrants in Iowa.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So many. And they're in East Central Iowa, many native
Right.
German speakers, and that there would be that much of a line in the sand.
Yeah.
I bet you there's some of the women who were involved in that had German blood in them.
Certainly.
Called the
Oh, yeah.
DAR.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong. I don't know, but
No, you're right. Steve, do you want to tell them about that project or not with Michael Luke Thrams with German Iowans?
So I have worked with Michael Luke Thrams, who's a historian of German heritage, who got interested in the POW camp. You want that story? At Algona? Barbara?
No, I wanted the story where he was doing something about how the Germans weren't being accepted here.
He's had a number of historical projects. This was after World War One. There was much prejudice against German Americans, even in Iowa. So he created a bus museum that went around the state of Iowa that had period pieces from 1918 to 1925 or so. And there were lots of prejudicial events after World War One. He also studied the POW camp at Algona.
Right.
From World War II.
Linda?
With the regards to the Germans in Iowa, if anyone is interested in more information, Davenport has a lovely German American Heritage Museum. Davenport was a very strong German community, and they lost their German-speaking schools and newspapers after World War I, and the museum has maintained some of that history. It's very interesting.
Mm.
In fact, the state of Iowa passed a law prohibiting churches from using the German language after World War I.
There's also a movie out right now called Silent Night in Algona, which speaks of a camp there of German soldiers who made a nativity scene that can still be seen in Algona today.
So on that topic I can tell you a lot about actually. So as it turns out, I'm sort of a serious numismatist, and Algona had chits and script from the time it was a POW camp. Well, the prisoners actually used a lot of them. They paid their own money that they had earned from the Geneva Convention. They worked in farms, in logging, in canning companies. They did lots of work at the time of World War II, and they paid for that nativity scene. Actually, there was a Sergeant KOIB who was in charge of that project. You can see it to this day at Christmas time. All right.
Steve Hankin. Gotta unmute, Steve. Unmute.
All right, now can we hear me? All right. The business of the Germans in the First World War. I did a thing for the 100th anniversary of World War I for the Jones County Historical Society. And I investigated that thoroughly. And there's all kinds of things that were happening in Iowa. And primarily because of the governor, who you mentioned, who banned all foreign languages, not just German. You couldn't speak Polish, you couldn't speak Czech, you couldn't speak anything over the phone, or you would get fined. My wife's great aunt got fined $25 for talking to one of her neighbors in German. And that was only part of it. The third bond program that they had, Iowa hadn't bought bonds very well. And they were trying to force the farmers to buy more bonds. And so what they did was they got a guy from Mason City who was involved with the federal government in banking. And he asked all the banks to give the state of Iowa cards on everybody's net worth. And they automatically said, okay, everybody's going to kick in 10% of their net worth to the bonds. And they did a kind of a kangaroo court thing where everybody showed up their polling places and they presented them with their cards and said, you're going to donate this much money. And if you want to complain about it, well, you can, but there's a guy in the back who will take note of this and they'll haul you off to the federal penitentiary in Kansas. And amazingly, Iowa did really good at selling bonds that time. And every other state in the union copied what Iowa did. There were cases in Muscatine where a minister was nearly hanged because he wouldn't stop preaching in German. He tried to tell the people that he had parishioners that were on death's door, and he says, and they don't know English, and they're not going to learn English, and it's the only way I can communicate with them. And still, they made him wrap himself up in the flag, put a rope around his neck, and marched him around town, and strung him up in a tree and pulled him up several times before they finally decided to just let him go. This thing was happening all over the place. If you said anything about a soldier or anything like that, you'd get clubbed, you'd get beat up. If you had any opinion about anything, and especially if you were kind of a hardcore knucklehead, there would be people that would try to get you to say something positive about the Kaiser or something like that, just to give them an opportunity to beat the hell out of him. This happened all over Iowa. So that's the last of my storytelling there.
Well, I think we'll go to something more cheerful now. I'm going to ask Nancy to share her poem on this. And thank you, Joe, for sharing that thing about Coe College. You're right on it. All right, Nancy, I think you're up again unless somebody else has a question.
Okay, we'll do this and then, maybe people will.
Okay.
questions after this. Soul angers. Angers at what? Why, that young upstart, Grant Wood. What has he done now? Why, he journeyed to Germany to work with German artists. Oh, my heavens. Why? Well, my dear, he said, Germans excelled with stained glass. Best in the world, he said. Best in the whole world. Employing them to work on our memorial window. No. More tea, my dear. Crumpet. Now, please gather here in front of your lovely fireplace. Annual officers' pictures, you know. If you insist, but I am not smiling. Of course not. Ladies, do not smile. Be regal. Your painting of Washington, the perfect background for us, the most patriotic of our ancestors, truly, truly, and courageous, and handsome, and regal, and presidential. We stand before this patriot. Never would he collaborate with the enemy. Let us renounce Wood. Draft a resolution. Yes, let us do that soon. Oh, my dears, such relief. Take the picture.
That's fun. Oh, it's a lot of fun, Nancy. Thank you.
And I wrote it before Barb told me, before I realized what her presentation was actually going to be.
Oh, isn't that fun?
Yeah.
When that sort of thing happens.
we just discovered that the other day.
Oh, that's fun. Yes. Things float around out there and people don't even realize that they're connected. And then all of a sudden they are, which is so much fun. Oh, goodness. And at some point here, I thought I'd let you all know I'm going to send another email soon that's maybe in the weeds with some suggestions for writing short pieces that aren't poetry, some ideas to get your thoughts going on that, and share some other poetry things as well, some things that I've unearthed and Dawn's things. And so I'll try to get some resources in front of you in the next few days on that. And of course, there's just the deadline for the Iowa Poetry Association contest, which includes the Grant Wood Poetry Prize, is the 28th. So if you're serious about doing that, go ahead and pop in and offer them up something. There's line limits and things for them, and you have to live in Iowa. Okay, so anybody else have any comments or things on your mind, or thinking back to all the presentations we've had up to this point and including this one? Any other?
Well, I dug a little bit, Elaine and Barb, and came up how I had used that research I mentioned earlier, and I'll just read it to you. And this was in regard to Parson Weems' fable, but it says, historians in the years prior to Wood's announcement had been denouncing some of the fables that had developed around American historical figures. As early as 1921, Henry Cabot Lodge, a Massachusetts politician and historian, spoke about mythmaker Parson Weems and his invention of the young George Washington cherry tree story that Lodge called hopelessly and ridiculously false. But why did Wood choose to do the first painting concerning the fable about George Washington? One biographer felt that Wood's interest may have stemmed from a family heirloom. Grant's great-grandmother on the Wood side of the family was a woman named Hannah Hollingsworth. The family had passed down a brown glass flask that would nicely fit into a pocket. Inscribed on the artifact were the words, "This pocket flask belonged to Colonel Hollingsworth of Virginia and was carried by him during the Revolutionary War. He was on General Washington's staff and said General Washington had drunk from it several times." Grant Wood had probably always taken some pride in this connection. So that's where that comment I made earlier came from.
That's great. That, yeah, because everything is in context. You don't know what's heating up at a particular point in time, you know, to affect the collective response.
So similar to today. Thank you, Paul. That was very interesting.
Okay, let me see if we've got anything else. And there was a link in the chat to, thank you, Joe, for the co-study of the co-piece, the link there. And then up a little further in the chat, Dawn did a link to, like she said she would. And then there's another link, thanks, Joe, for the Gazette piece about the house, about the oh, what was it? What was the name of the piece again? Decor.
Oh, the overmantel decoration.
Overmantel
Yeah.
decoration. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that house.
So yeah, we've got those several links in the chat. I want to give you a chance to capture those if you wanted to. So does anybody else have anything else on their mind?
I do. It's Linda.
Yes.
I've been thinking about the darkness of the Washington crossing the Delaware in the Daughters of Revolution. I keep thinking that maybe that was to hint at how unenlightened the daughters were about the actual history and story of that painting.
I like it. That sounds good. That sounds like a good interpretation.
And of course, the fact that it was German, and that's what they were complaining about. And here they were praising that picture. Yes, very ironic and very.
And isn't the lace collar and the pin, didn't he bring them back from Germany for his mother? Did I hear that sometime or read that somewhere, that you know, the subtleness of his satire, but that there were lots of German things in there that you know, that maybe looked to other people like what they would see their friends wearing, or the DAR people, that, you know, they'd seen those. But I've read that that lace collar and that little pin both were from Germany, and he brought them back for his mother.
Yeah, Nancy.
We have a reproduction of this painting that sits up in the studio. And when I'm doing tours in the studio, I concentrate on the things that Grant Wood did there to make it his home, and don't talk about his paintings too much, because I leave that to the people that are at the museum, at the main museum. But every now and then I will get questions about them. And this painting is one of my favorite stories to tell. I love this painting because Grant Wood, and this is one of the things that I try to get across to people, is Grant Wood had lots of friends. He was a very personable guy. He had a really good personality, great sense of humor, which comes out all the time in his work. And I don't think he was a person who would have been vicious in his retort to an organization or to anybody else, you know. So this was his calm, subtle way of really giving them a zinger. And you know, the thing that's so funny about it is that those ladies probably have a clue that a German artist painted that, and they were so proud to put it in their homes, you know. And I think a lot of people had that painting, reproduction of that painting, in their homes. And so, you know, he was able, they might not have even got it, you know, when the painting first became known. I would guess that. I would guess they were clueless. So I think it's a great story. It's a great personality thing for Grant Wood to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And to Martha's point too, we could invite, we know someone we could invite in to explore this whole tie into homoeroticism. We could do a one-off on that. through the forum at some point. And that thought has crossed my mind, and the idea of just erasure of gay identity within the context of art exhibitions and things. So that's a topic that we would have available to us through the forum, and bring in a guest speaker for that. So if there's interest in that, let me know. I'll try to make that happen.